Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Sunday of the Dialogue Gospel Study. Today it's May 27th, 2023, and our instructor today is Kwani Winder. I'm Esther Kandari, and on behalf of the Dialogue Board, we just want to say how happy we are to gather with all of you, and thank you for joining us today. Whether you're a longtime listener or you've just found Dialogue Gospel Study, we invite you to check out all that Dialogue has to offer on our website, dialoguejournal.com. You can find our previous gospel studies there, as well as some other wonderful offerings like Dialogue Out Loud, the Dialogue Book Report, as well as links to all the great shows in the Dialogue Podcast Network, such as Beyond the Shadow of a Doubt and This Global Latter-day Life. For those of you who are joining us live on Zoom today, as always, you're invited to post respectful and relevant comments in the chat, and we'll monitor that and try to bring them up as they're relevant throughout the lesson. Just to introduce today's teacher, Kwani is an artist located in Ogden, Utah. Her oil paintings are characterized by vibrant colors and a loose impressionistic brushstrokes. Her subject matter primarily includes landscapes and figures. Kwani is an avid plein air artist and eagerly takes every chance to paint from life. Kwani's work also is heavily influenced by being a Santa Clara Pueblo Indian. Through her painting, she seeks to preserve, share, and educate about her unique heritage. I also have the great pleasure of being one of Kwani's friends, and I just want to say I love her perspective. She always brings in a very nuanced and rich view of the world, of the gospel, of other people, and is deeply dedicated to building community and to educating people and to really expanding the borders of Zion through her work. So just a real privilege to learn from her today. We're going to start off with an opening prayer from Mike Austin, a member of the Dialogue Board, and then we will go to an opening hymn, I Stand All.
Our dear God, we thank you so very much for the technology that allows us to experience this lesson today, and we thank you for the community that gives us the support and both the spiritual and the intellectual pleasures of listening to Kwani and the lesson that she has prepared. We are so grateful for the gospel. We're grateful for the world that we live in. We're grateful for the life that we have and the experiences that we enjoy and the many privileges that we take part in. Please today be with our teacher, and please be with all of the listeners and all of those who are tuning in the various channels that we have. Let your spirit be with us. Let us seek to understand, to expand our knowledge and also our empathy. And we say these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Mike. One just fun trivia fact before we dive into the lesson with Kwani. So the girls that did that opening hymn are the cousins of Yum Tongi, who just won American Idol. So fun Mormon trivia. Kwani, take it away for us.
Hey, I am nervous to be here today. Technology is not my strong point, but I hope that as we dive into these parables that I have been studying, that, thank you for the prayer, that things will kind of come together. It is interesting because I initially was going to teach a different week, and I'd kind of looked at the material for that and then moved to this week. And these parables have actually been a very guiding force in my life of how I approach things, how I perceive the world, and how I interact with the world. And so I'm really excited to share these with you because they are they've made me into the person and the artist that I am today. And so two questions I want you to keep in mind today as we are going through, and I just want you to ponder them in your heart, is I was always uncomfortable with this question growing up, but I'm still going to ask it of you because I want you to think of it in a different way. We're always encouraged to focus on missionary work. And growing up, in my mind, that was always like okay, missionaries serve a mission, they preach the gospel 24/7, like, it means inviting someone to church, getting them baptized. And that was like my very young perception of missionary work. As I have grown and grown in my knowledge and grown in, it's very much more subtle than that. And as I've become an artist and started to paint religious and depict religious kind of spiritual paintings, that has changed as well, because I have had missionary opportunities that, you know, you wouldn't say led to somebody's conversion or things, but it's been opportunities to share my light that I've found, the happiness and the light of Christ. And so one of the questions I want to ask you to think about is, how can I share the gospel? How can I, and this is the second one, it's kind of the same thing, but maybe a little bit different. How can I share the light of Christ? Those are the two things that I want you to think about as we go through these parables. The first one I want to talk about is the parable of the talents. And this is probably the parable that has made the most impact on my life. So it's very special to me. Let's go ahead and let's watch the video of the parable of the talents. It's just a recording. Instead of me reading the scripture, I have a video of the scripture being shared. So let's go ahead and pull that up.
For the kingdom of heaven is as a man traveling into a far country, who called his own servants and delivered unto them his goods. And unto one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to every man according to his several ability. And straightway took his journey. Then he that had received the 5 talents went and traded with the same, and made them other 5 talents. And likewise he that had received 2 talents, he also gained other 2. But he that had received 1 went and digged in the earth and hid his Lord's money. After a long time, the Lord of those servants cometh and reckoneth with them. And so he that had received 5 talents came and brought other 5 talents, saying, Lord, thou deliverest unto me 5 talents. Behold, I have gained beside them 5 talents more. His Lord said unto him, Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. He also that had received 2 talents came and said, Lord, thou deliverest unto me 2 talents. Behold, I have gained 2 other talents beside them. His Lord said unto him, Well done, good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. Then he which had received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew thee that thou art an hard man, reaping where thou hast not sown, and gathering where thou hast not strawed. And I was afraid, and went and hid thy talent in the earth. Lo, there thou hast that is thine. His Lord answered, and said unto him, Thou wicked and slothful servant, thou knewest that I reap where I sowed not, and gathered where I have not strawed. Thou oughtest therefore to have put my money to the exchangers, and at my coming I should have received mine own with usury. Take therefore the talent from him, and give it to him which hath 10 talents. For unto every one that hath shall be, and he shall have abundance. But from him that hath not shall be taken away even that he hath. And cast ye the unprofitable servant into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth.
I have felt, in my life, I have been blessed with a lot of interests and a lot of talents. Growing up, I was blessed with a mother who loved art, and she fostered that in me from a very young age. And even though I had never planned to be an artist, like ever, I, to the point that I was like, art's not a career. And that was like my mantra all throughout high school and even into college. But I was given art. And then once I embraced that talent, like I took classes, I did AP art in high school. But once I embraced that talent and switched my major to art, it was like my brain just like opened up to so much more than just the drawing and the painting that I was doing. All of a sudden, I found I had a very avid interest in bookmaking. I was really good at it too. I loved sculpture. Matter of fact, I might be a sculpture artist today if I had started off my art career doing a sculpture class instead of doing a painting class, because I love it that much. And I love the form and I love the figure. And I love photography, and all of these talents kind of like branched out from this initial talent of just drawing and coloring and painting. And my life has been very blessed. I've been blessed to teach classes on fun things, introduce them to other types of art, introduce other people to other types of art. And I feel like this particular talent I was given, and then once I decided like and owned it, I was able to expand it out, and it to the point that not even like physically being an artist, but also my brain thinks in art ways. And especially when I'm reading the scriptures or when I'm listening to general conference or things like that, my brain goes into like, how does this apply in an art way? And I'm always relating it to color, to light. And so I've been able to take truths that are taught to me and relate them. The spirit helps me translate them into a way that I understand. And that's through my talents, I guess, for a better, lack of a better way to say that. I'm going to put Esther on the spot. I don't know, have you seen that in your life as you've developed your artist talent? You've definitely had more schooling in it than I did eventually embrace my artist side, switched my major, became a Bachelor of Fine Arts. And but anyways, I want to hear Esther's.
Sorry, recap the question. I'm not sure I totally caught it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I saw the first little bit of it, of something about art makes it easy to easier to share, but I didn't see that.
Okay, there. Yeah, I probably zoned out for half a second. ADD brain. I found that so true. It's actually a big part of the reason that I went into art in the first place. I've always been fascinated with the concept of communicating with people. So I grew up in a mixed race family. My dad's an immigrant. Most of my family on my dad's side, English is their second language. A fair amount of them speak English, but it's fairly clearly their second language, and some of them don't speak English at all. And so I had many relatives growing up that I couldn't communicate with. And I grew up in a place where there's a lot of people that, also spoke English as a second language. And but art and music and those types of forums, there were always spaces where people could come together. And our world needs more spaces where people can come together. There's an increasing focus on divides rather than building bridges and community. And I think that's really at the core of the gospel, is building community and building an understanding of each other. And there's, in my mind, no better way to do that than art. And some people might fight me on that, but I will stand firm on that hill.
Can we talk about our comment, or did you see the rest of it? I didn't see the rest of it, and I don't know how to look at it.
Yeah, so the comment is just the Bible and Book of Mormon videos make missionary work so much easier.
It is incredibly nicer. I mean, I could have read the scripture, but I hate it. Not hate it. Hate's too strong of a word. I have a very hard time focusing when scriptures are read to me. I have to be the one reading them. And even then, like about if it's more than a few verses, my brain zones out. And I'm like, what did I just read? So anyways, so I love that talent because, and I don't think I put that together until I was studying this lesson. Here I am, 33 years old, didn't realize like, oh my word, my talent of art like was given to me, but here I've been able to take it and grow it in other ways and grow it outward. And not only that, as I've grown it outward, adding in photography and sculpture has only made my initial talent better of drawing figures and understanding light better through a photographer's lens. It's allowed me to take better reference photos. And so, like I said, that is a very real world applicable moment that I've taken this parable and kind of, made it my own and applied it in my own life. Something I thought was incredibly interesting that I also didn't pick up on until I was studying this parable this time around. Like the other two parables that we'll talk today are about the sheep and the goats, and then the 10 virgins. And clearly in those other two parables, there is this side that was good, this side that is bad, or less desirable. But in this one, there's three. There's the one that got 1 talent, one that got 2, and one that got 5. And I really kind of was wondering, like, why did he include the example of the 2? Because the same thing could have been illustrated with just the 1 and the 5. The 5 took his 5, made 5 more. The 1 buried his 1. He missed out on an opportunity, but then there's this 2. And so I looked at what the Lord said about the 2. So the response to number 5 is in verse 21 of Matthew 25. And he said, his Lord said unto him, well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of the Lord. And then his response to the person who got 2 talents. His Lord said unto him, well done, good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. He said the exact same thing. The only difference between those 2 verses is in the first verse, he said, well done, thou good and faithful servant, versus when he was talking to the number 2, he said, well done, good and faithful servant. And so I think this is a very important and key part of this parable, because not everybody is given stewardship over many things. And it's not because they can't handle them. And it's not because they're any better. The person with 5 is any better than the person with 2. Both of the people who took what they were given and made it more, they were blessed with the exact same thing. They were told the exact same thing. And I think that's huge, because comparison is a lot of people's downfalls. Pride is a lot of people's downfalls. And there's this constant natural man that wants to put people down. And the one thing that I've really learned over the years is that you succeeding or me succeeding does not make you any less, does not make anybody else any less. Matter of fact, if I succeed and you succeed, we are more than if we just did it on our own. And so I really encourage you to take a moment and think about the talents. I'm blessed because a lot of my talents are very visible and maybe cursed a little bit too, because it makes it a little bit easier to identify those things. But I have friends in my circle that their talents aren't visual, that their talents are more subtle than that. And at times they have struggled with identifying those things that are so apparent to me, being an outsider looking into their lives. I have a friend that is very, very kind and very, very open with her love. And that can be shown visually, but it's more so shown in how she talks to people and how the people feel around her. And that's less accessibly seen, or even seen by her, because it's this ripple effect. She can see the first wave of the people she touches, but she doesn't see how that extends beyond the people that she immediately reacts with. And so think about the blessings, not only the talents, but the blessings that you've been given. Maybe it's the family you grew up in, because not everybody's family circumstances are the same. Maybe it's the area that you grew up in. Maybe it's the job that you have and the hours that you're able to work. Or maybe it's the heritage that you have. There's many blessings that we are given from the Lord that we can take and that we can amplify and we can make more. And I want to talk a little about my own journey again with this story. I was very adamant that art was not a thing. Other people did that. And they train their whole lives to do that. And so you don't just like enter the art world because you want to. I was attending, even after I decided that I was going to be an artist, I attended a conference. And I can't even remember who the speaker was. But what I do remember, and it changed my life for a good way, my artist life. I had embraced being an artist and I was like, yay, I'm doing the art thing. This is me. I fully committed to it. And then they talked about, well, what are you doing with your talents for the Lord? How are you consecrating your abilities, your talents, your time? And I realized, ooh, I hadn't even thought about that. And I wasn't doing anything. Like, there is my art and there is my gospel, and those two did not intertwine and they didn't mix, and I didn't even think about the fact that they could, which is crazy because the art and the gospel go so well together. But it was at that point that I started painting and exploring. I was primarily a landscape artist. And it was at that point that I started painting figurative works that were combining my culture, which was a blessing, my beliefs, my gospel, and my artwork in together, tying those three to become the works that I'm actually probably most famous for now. That was the beginning point of when, and if I hadn't attended that conference and I hadn't been there to learn, and I hadn't been open to counsel to how should I develop these talents of mine even more, I would have missed out on that. I would have missed out on this whole opportunity that I've had to share the gospel through my art, to share the light of Christ with people who can't put their finger on why they like my paintings and why my paintings are different. But I know, because of the spirit that they were created with, makes a difference in how people interact with my artwork. There was a comment. What was oh, you're muted.
You would think after 3 years I would figure this out. The comment is from Joanne. If you are a pretty good Relief Society teacher, sooner or later the bishop will ask you to be the Relief Society president. I'm sorry, that isn't a reward. As someone who was called from being a really studied teacher to being in the presidency, yes, I feel that deeply. I'm sorry. Why is having authority to make decisions for other people, like being kings and queens and other royal titles, assumed to be the thing that we want? I'd like to respond to this really briefly before I hand it back to you, Kwani. Something I think about, this is something I've thought a lot about, and how I think sometimes this parable is interpreted as like immediately being like authority and like leadership and power within a community. And I think it can mean that. But for me personally, as I've pondered this, I think it's also much more of a personal thing, that the things that are multiplied for us don't necessarily mean that they're multiplied in a leadership sense, that they might be multiplied in, expanding our ability to, if our gift is to love, or expanding our ability to love, if our gift is to be able to perceive the needs of others, that we have expansion to that, or like, there's many examples I can give from my own life and the talents that I've been blessed with. Well, I don't like the term talent because I feel like all of it comes from work one way or the other. But I think in the church, it often is interpreted that way. And so how do we take a step back and see how we've inserted the titles of the world into the kingdom of God, if that makes sense? So that's my personal take. Kwani, what's yours?
Quite honestly, I've never thought of it as leading to leadership, or, it's been very personal to me as I've interacted with these things. It's been, how can I become a better person? How can I make the people that I'm around, or the people I interact with, how can I lift them? And so it's not necessarily how can I control them, not control them, control is the wrong word, but how it's more so like me, how can I become a better person? How can I grow? And in that sense, how can I help other people around me grow? Because I think that's part of why these parables are given to us, is how to reflect on ourselves, and what are we doing, and what are our choices, and how our choices affect other people, for good or for bad. And are we lifting people up? Are we building people, or are we taking away from them? Is how I've always looked at it, I guess. It's just a very individual, like me, like how is my choices affecting me and me becoming a better person, not necessarily becoming a king or a ruler, or because I get that you're talking about like once the second coming comes, and I guess to me it's always been personal. I've never thought of like, oh, I'll have a lot of people under me, or it's just been like, oh, I'll have my family with me, and how can I best help my family? And I don't know what our family is going to look like at that point, but for me, it's been a smaller focus. I guess I've never thought of it that way, so maybe I need to take some time and think more of how that would. I would like to go on to the parable of the sheep and goats. This is how much I pay attention. I did not realize that this parable started off with, yeah.
Do you mind if I make one more comment on this parable before I move on?
Yeah.
So this, like you, I think this is one that I spent a lot of time thinking about, because talent is a word that gets thrown at me a lot and thrown around in the professional spaces that I work in. And to the servant who buries their talent, something I've thought about in the capacity I've been able to serve in as a teacher and as a mentor in my community, is how often, well, I think it's interesting that he approaches the Lord with fear. That he's like, I kind of like, I'm in awe, I'm in fear of like what you do. So I just was, very careful with what I have, and I didn't expand upon that. And I think a way I could draw some parallels and see that reflected in the work that I've done is how often I have conversations, especially with women artists, especially with artists of color, in that they are afraid to really expand themselves. And often within Latter-day Saint culture, there's this sense of almost a false humility in that I can't, I can't price my stuff well. I can't, expect to be paid for my work. I can't, submit to these big shows because I would be prideful if I do that. And so I think we often confuse the very genuine command to be humble and to avoid pride with a confidence in our divine nature, in our divine gifts, in our opportunities, and the things that we can do with those things and the ways that we can exponentially expand them as we approach them with the right perspective. And so that's something I've thought a lot about when I've studied this.
I guess that made me think of like the phrase, like the knowledge is power, and you don't know what you don't know. And when you do take an ownership over those things, instead of being passively affected by those things, now you can take control, and you can control what those things are used for, how they go forward. I didn't focus a lot on the one because that hit his talents. I did think it was weird. I didn't know the word usury. That it was like, I was like, what in the world is that? Because I get the gist of what he's talking about. And he was upset, like, why did you take this? Why did you bury it? Why didn't you make it more? I should charge you tax on this because you didn't do anything with it. But I think the one maybe didn't recognize what he had. And because he didn't understand it and he didn't learn about it, the unknown can be so scary. And then the pressure of having to do something with something you're not comfortable with can cause us to shrink. And I think in that moment, he chose to shrink. And I've done that before. I've been there. I've been the person who said and looked back and been like, I could have done so much more. I could have done more with that opportunity. I wasted that opportunity. And I think hopefully, instead of just feeling ashamed that person took that moment, expanding on the parable, I guess, I've took that and used it as a growing moment. Mm-hmm. And like, okay, I learned I should do more with what I'm given, in the future. And I think his motivations, like you said, Esther, were out of fear. And I think the other ones maybe necessarily weren't fearful. They just, they pushed forward. Like, I wonder if the person who got 5 and made 5 more, if he was fearful and maybe he was uncertain, but I don't think he would have been as successful if he had the same attitude. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Anyways.
I had a friend in college who had an insane amount of skills, like spoke multiple languages, had all these really crazy cool hobbies, was very successful in his career. And I was like, how do you do all these things? He's like, I'm never afraid to embarrass myself when I'm learning. And it's a phrase that I come back to a lot, that when I'm trying something new, I'm like, okay, like, why should I be embarrassed? Like, why is this holding me back from enjoying something new in my life, learning a new way to serve? That like, embarrassment is such like it's not to some extent a false pretense in our minds that holds us back from so much.
It's true. Something similar. My mantra is you can learn something from anybody. I, as an artist, can learn something from someone else who's just starting their art career, even though I have a lot more experience in this area. And I think that translates very well into the gospel of, someone who's new to exploring their faith, that they have beautiful, beautiful things and probably more pure things to offer than someone who's well-versed and well-studied and sometimes can get tripped up on words and things. But I see that in art a lot. There's a lot of hoity-toities that are really proud of themselves and a little too like they need to be taken down a notch. But
We won't
I
name.
see them, I know, I see them missing out on opportunities to learn because they say, I already know that. Like,
Yeah.
I've already been there, I've already done that. And I try to be very humble and always humble to learn that and recognize that everybody has someone else, something to teach somebody else, and everybody has a gift or a talent that I don't have, and that I can, if I'm humble enough to say I can learn from you, then my heart is open, and I've gotten some beautiful things that have come from that I've seen other people miss out on because they were not ready to hear it and they weren't ready to grow.
Yeah.
So, man, I was worried about filling the time, and now I'm like, oh no, the time. The parable of the sheep and the goats. Again, this is how I go through life. I read things and I miss things, and I didn't realize this parable was about sheep and goats. I just thought it was people on the right hand and people on the left hand. And I wanted to read, let me find the verse here in just a second. So this parable starts off with a gathering and then a separation. And so I don't know if that's a judgment or if it was just, if the judgment comes later. But what I want to focus on is that the point where he talks about the things that you do for me. I have a friend who is doesn't believe in Christ. I don't know if she calls herself an atheist per se, but she brought out a very good point that made me uncomfortable. And so it was kind of neat to have that opportunity to look through of like, why am I motivated to do things? And she's like, I do good things because they're good. And I don't need someone telling me out of fear that like this bad thing is going to happen to you if you don't do this good thing. And she's like, so I don't need Christ in my life because I'm a good person and I do good things. And I celebrated her for that because I'm like, yay, thank you for doing good things. She's an amazing person. I'm so lucky to have her in my life. And especially this moment that she taught me, because I'd never thought of the context of there are very many good people in and outside of the gospel and partly in, or, you know, you don't have to be in the gospel to be a good person. You don't have to be to share the light of Christ. There's many, many things that are beautiful about the people on the earth. And so this parable makes me a little uncomfortable. What I do like about it is when you're helping people and you're feeding and clothing them, like I take this as a moment of self-reflection of like, why did I help people? Was it to be seen or was it to be a good person? Am I helping people? Am I giving of my substance to other people? Am I being accepting of them, of where they're at? Am I being an open person, a safe place for people who think differently in my life than me? And am I okay with being uncomfortable and learning from them? Am I okay? Like, it's so much more than just feeding and clothing people, which is very important because there are many people in our lives who need physical help, who cannot be more because they are focused on just living. And if we can help people get rid of those worries and become at a stable point, those people now have better opportunity to become more than just focusing on the essentials of life, of living. And I like the question that they come back with of like, back to the Lord of like, when did I do this to you? When did I feed you? When did I clothe you? When saw I ye naked? Like, and they come to the Lord with that. And he said, it was me. You were doing it to me. And I feel like there's the ultimate commandment of love thy neighbor as thyself. And I think that this can be taken as well as like, when you do this to somebody else, I hope that when I'm in need, someone will do that to me. But even if they don't, I still want to focus on the other, on helping, on reaching, on lifting the people around me, because it's a good thing to do, not because I'm scared that I'm going to be on the left-hand side of God and be a goat. And it's severe what he says. It's like the fires of cursed into everlasting fire and prepared for the devil and his angels. Very strong language for those that don't do these things. But I also feel like maybe the curse is, for me, the joy is being with people and enjoying people in the diversity. And maybe being taken away from that and being isolated, that would be hell to me, of not being able to connect with people and not being able to. So by serving other people, you're connecting and lifting them up. Any comments on this before I move on?
I often see this scripture thrown around in a I'm a sheep and you're a goat context. I think it's really easy for us to be like, oh, I'm definitely one of those and not them. But the person making the decision here is Christ. So who are we to decide, right? And then, it immediately follows with, the people that are considered Christ's people. It's this whole list of like, you're completely selfless and you're caring for the poor. You're looking out for the most downtrodden and persecuted in your communities. And so it's always just a reminder to me of like, why am I wasting my time wondering if I'm a sheep or a goat? Like, this list should keep me busy till the end of my life. And like, then Christ will deal with it. Like, my worry is asking myself if I'm really living this list of serving my fellow man.
Yeah, it's, and I think I would encourage you to think of the more subtleties. Parables are told in the extreme to help illustrate the point of it. But I want to encourage you to find the middle ground, or pull it back from like, you were starving and I gave you food and it saved your life. Like, who are the people in our lives that need a friend? Who are the people in our lives that need a kind word? That need more subtle attention, and focus on those things? Because at least for me, when I need those subtle things and they happen and they're given to me, even if it's just a smile on a really bad day, like, that's huge in my life. And it was a small thing for that person to give me, but it made a huge impact. And again, it goes back to that ripple effect of like, how are you touching people, and how are you helping the people around you for good? How are you lifting them up, or are you putting them down? How are you building people in the kingdom? How are you building your fellow men, or are you taking them down? And that's what I get out of this, I guess, is just the reminder to do the subtle things. And then I would encourage you to take a moment and reflect, and maybe make a plan of action. Think of the one person in your life that may be struggling. Think of, and it may be your spouse, your partner, your child. Think of one thing, just one thing that maybe you can do differently with that interaction with them to help build them. Because there are many times that I choose not to build people. And it's important to recognize those things too, because if you don't know that if you don't take the time to reflect on how your interactions are influencing people, or how your interactions are building you, then you're missing out on learning opportunities. But really, that would be my one thing that this week, that you take a moment to reflect on someone in your life who's maybe quiet and is quietly suffering, and maybe try and see that and help them, or be a safe spot, or be a safe word, safe place with words for someone, words of comfort, or just a listening ear, because those are also very good things, and very good things that help people. So I had a video on the 10 virgins. I don't know if we need to watch it. In the same breath that I love the parable of the talents, the parable of the virgins doesn't relate as much to me. I've had to struggle through trying to like find the connections in my life, and maybe because I need to spend more time with it to learn. But the biggest thing and the biggest takeaway for me has always been testimony, that my testimony can't be built. It has to be internal. And I think maybe that's the takeaway for me from all of these parables, is that it's a very internal reflection of where am I at, and an evaluation of what do I have? Do I have a reserve? Have I built things around me to help support me in what I'm doing? Am I doing the things that I know I should do, like prayer, scripture reading? I'll be honest, I struggle with reading scriptures. I have a very hard time with that. Conference talks are my jam, and I think it's because they're more conversational. It's easier for me to relate to, and there's stories and there's things. But so that's one thing, as I was reading that parable, that I was like, it's something I know I need to do, and it's something I need to be better at doing. But that's not a struggle for other people. And so maybe, think about in your life of the things that we've been counseled to do to build ourselves and build our relationship with God, because Jesus Christ. And it just, like I said, this parable was very interesting to me to look at again, because it's been a minute since I had looked at this one. But any other thoughts?
I actually want to jump back to the previous one. So something that jumped out at me as I was reading through these verses again is that he specifically says that you gave me meat when I was hungered. And there's other places in the New Testament. I want to go back and look at the Greek and see how it was translated, because there's always some funny layers to that. But there's often, comparisons of like milk versus meat, and like this concept of nourishing, and like the different levels of nourishment. And to your comment of like, are we actually really caring for the people in our lives? Like, how often do we see needs and we offer them a granola bar, not a full course meal, right? Like what is the meat we're offering to those that are hungry, and what are they hungry for, and how can we fill that?
I think about grieving. Grieving is a really hard thing to help people when they're in that moment, because you don't know what to say, you don't know what to do. And I had a lot of granola bars handed to me when my dad passed away, and I was in a very, very dark place. I had a lot of granola bars handed to me when I had postpartum depression for 2 years after I had my first daughter. And I didn't realize I was in it, that it was that bad, until I came out of it and realized, whoa, that was a really deep hole that I was in. But I guess the things that helped me were the people that earnestly tried. I could tell a difference. Two people might say the exact same thing, and it's the wrong thing to say in that moment. But I could tell the person who was genuine and was making an effort to reach out to me and to be there for me, and the person who was saying it because they felt like they needed to say something, and then they were checking a box. And like, oh, I said something to them, they know I think about them, versus the person's like, I don't know what to say, but here's this thing and this. And I guess it just really, the depth that you can get when you're genuine and you genuinely care about people, makes a huge difference. I know that there are many surface people, and it's uncomfortable because you have to be comfortable with yourself to be genuine, to connect to someone on this level versus just up here. I hate small talk. It's very vulnerable to be down lower and to be someone that's giving a full meal, because it takes commitment, it takes understanding, it takes a listening ear, and those things are very difficult at different times for different people. And I'm not saying that you do these things at the sacrifice of yourself, because there are personal boundaries that you keep. I think sometimes we look at these parables and we're like, we have to do it all, we have to give it all and everything. And like, no, part of being a stewardship is finding balance and being responsible for that balance. And sometimes your balance is this way, and sometimes it's that way. And being willing to look at and constantly evaluate of like, whoa, that was too much. I need to tone it back just a little bit. There's been times, again, in my art career where I've gotten my family and my art out of balance. And we sat back at the end of a year and we're just like, that was bad. And I made choices that were not healthy. And even though I did really good things over here, it's not to discount the good things that I did, but you also have to balance your mental health and your ability, your physical ability, your physical tiredness. I think this goes back to the parable of those talents. Sometimes we can get 5 and we got 5. Sometimes we only have 2. And we get 2. The important thing is that we're trying whatever level we're at. And that's all we're asked. We're not asked to run ourselves ragged, because then we have nothing left to give, because we didn't keep anything to sustain ourselves. And when those times do happen, I am grateful for those people that give me meat and help me nourish myself back to health again when I've overextended myself.
And I think too, when you're serving, recognizing that that's the perfect opportunity to tap into community, and that just because you recognize the need doesn't mean that you're the one who has to fulfill all of those needs. I think a great example, so Kwani and I have a mutual friend who's had a really rough couple of years, and a few months back I was over visiting her and had a conversation with her and kind of read between the lines of things she was saying and recognized that she had some pretty severe, temporal needs in that moment, but that because she was, focused on the temporal needs for her family, there are some things that she personally was putting on the back shelf as far as the things that she cares about and her developing her personal talents. And so I reached out to Kwani and a couple of other friends who know this individual and was like, hey, like if we all just put, $30 in the basket here, we could put together something really nice for her to address these needs that she's experiencing. And everybody pulled together, and I ended up taking her some food and a gift card for some art supplies. And she messaged me afterwards, and she's like, so many people see my situation and just see me as a mother, as someone who's trying to make sure that my kids have food. People don't see me for me and the things that I can give to my community with my talents, with the things that I'm doing. She's like, thank you so much for seeing me for me. And that's something I've thought a lot about as I've served in various capacities. Like, are we seeing people for them? Not just, their, stereotypical role, like, oh, they're a father, they're a mother. And those things are very important, but who are they? And what are we doing to feed them?
It's very true. I was terrified to become a mother when I was just starting as my art. And this past week, I actually was able to talk to somebody that had I'd given an art seminar type thing for the Inspirational Art Association. And I had felt very impressed that I needed to talk about being an artist and being a mother, because when I was in college, it was basically a death sentence. And I know I've heard Jenny D. Page talk about this, because her and I went to the same art school. But I was terrified that becoming a mother would mean giving up who I was, because I was an artist. And it's been very blessed for me, because it's only made me better. It's made me a better artist as I've become a mother. And in turn, this week, I was able to talk to somebody who saw me give a talk about this, this point of you can do it both. You don't have to give up one to be the other. That's a whole other story about the sacrifices of cultural motherhood. But it was incredible to me to be able to have given her permission, I guess, or she needed someone to tell her, you can do it, and see an example of someone that had done it. And there's this whole generation, it's very inspiring to me, that's like my age and a little bit younger, that are trying to do it all, and it's really cool. But anyways, I appreciate everybody that has been here to listen and to kind of help me flesh out these things. The takeaways is, how can I share the gospel and how can I share the light of Christ? And I specifically want you to think about not necessarily preaching the gospel to somebody, but how can you, like, our gospel is a gospel of love. How can I share love? How can I share light? How can I lift those around me with my abilities, my talents? How can I open my eyes to see more? And then perfect myself in that, of how can I become a better person? And ultimately, that translates into just a lifetime of recognizing the bad and fixing the good, and shifting those things over from the bad pile into the good pile. And sometimes they wander back, and you have to just keep trying to get it over. But that would be my takeaway, is to evaluate yourself, look at your talents, look at your blessings, your strengths, even your weaknesses, because your weaknesses can be strengths once they're recognized. But just become a better person, lift up those people around you, make the world a better place, because it's pretty bad out there sometimes, all the time.
Thank you, Kwani. Just some comments here. Great lesson. Happy Pentecost. And thank you for the focus on love and light. Yeah, I didn't realize it's Pentecost. That's awesome. I think it's one of those holidays that in Latter-day Saint tradition, we're just like not sure what to do with, but lots of other people in Christianity, celebrate in various ways. And yeah, I think it's actually kind of cool that this is the lesson, that you're the teacher we had for today, in the sense that I think sometimes being an artist, whatever form your art takes, is a way of like speaking in tongues in the gospel sense, that we're providing these insights into God that sometimes aren't always like immediately translatable for people, but it's this celebration of the divine, this celebration of the joy that we feel, the celebration of the knowledge that we've come to gain, both, just in kind of the traditional sense of like things we understand from the scriptures. But I know, speaking for myself, and I think you probably echo this as well, there's a certain level of emotional knowledge that comes from grappling with painting religious images, whether that's a story from the scriptures or just more of a concept, that you get to know that thing in a way that words can never quite comprehend. And it's something that I'm really grateful for, that I've had that experience. And all I hope to do with my work is to be able to help people just even catch a glimpse of that, to have that same emotional knowledge of truth, of love, when they experience my work. So thank you for sharing your thoughts and your heart with us today. And thank you all for joining us. I just wanted to say a brief goodbye. This will be my last lesson with Dialogue. I'm stepping away to work on some other projects in my life, but it's been a pleasure to do this with all of you for the last year or so. And I'm really grateful for the rest of the Dialogue board and all that they do in facilitating this. And I think this Sunday study is one of the silver linings that's blossomed out of the pandemic. So much that went downhill for the world with all of that, but it's been beautiful to kind of pick out some of these things that wouldn't have happened otherwise. And I think this is one of those. We're going to close out today with a hymn, I Am a Child of God, by the Kaysville and Fruit Heights Primary Choir. And then Kwani will be giving our closing prayer. As always,
Our Heavenly Father, we thank Thee for this day, for the chance to gather. We thank Thee for the opportunity to be here on this earth, to become better people, to develop, to grow. Help us to recognize those around us who need us, who need our special gifts, our special talents. Help us to know what to do, how to grow them and use them to lift others. We thank thee for thy Spirit, for our Savior. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Kwani. Just a reminder, our next live lesson will be June 25th at 9 a.m. Mountain Standard Time or 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And our teacher will be Bob Reese. For those of you who'd like to hang out for our after chat, we'll be going on to that in just a minute. But if you need to run, we totally understand that. And thank you for joining us.